Astrology is a tool of empowerment.
It was more than the horoscopes.
Something up there can help us navigate what's going on down here.
It's more than just a fun game, although it can be if you want it to be.
There's as many versions of astrology as there are hair colors.
I love it. I wake up in the morning eager to do what I do. It's real. I began to realize there was something fundamentally missing from the scientific astronomical books I was reading.
When I found astrology and started learning more and living more according to what the chart suggested, I found that life started to make more sense.
It can offer perspective on our gifts, our strengths.
Oh, I've heard more than you could. I mean, I've been doing this for 16 years. I've heard like the wildest.
We can predict the questions that will come along for individuals or societies.
I've seen a lot of light bulb moments.
From a very young age, I had very strange and magical experiences that I couldn't talk to anybody about.
Yeah, how does it all work? It's like, what's the meaning of life, Steve?
Basic idea of astrology, to me, is the definition, is the study of the influence of celestial objects on human affairs.
Astrology tracks time. It comes from watching the sky move and noticing that life moves with it. Long before belief, people paid attention to return, cycles that repeated whether they were understood or not. Astrology formed as a way to mark those cycles. It doesn't claim that the sky causes events. It observes that timing shapes experience. Astrology doesn't offer certainty. It doesn't promise outcomes. It concerns itself with timing. And for each person, that timing begins once, at birth.
Birth chart is a very simple thing. It's a map of the sky as it looked from the perspective of your place of birth at the time of your birth. For example, if you're born at dawn, the sun would be on what we call the ascendant, just the eastern horizon of the birth chart. If you're born at noon, it would be up higher overhead in the sky. That's why time is so important. Sun is rising in San Francisco, and where is it in Beijing? Where is it in Paris? At that same instant. So the location of the birth becomes important. It's all based on the viewpoint of the space and time in which you took your first breath of air. That's the birth chart, just a map of the sky.
There's a range of possibilities of how the signs, the symbols can express themselves.
In everyone's birth chart, we have certain archetypes. The sun is the self. The moon is the innermost needs, the mother, the maiden, the crone. Then we have Mercury, the communicator. We have Venus, which is about Aphrodite and relationship and attractiveness and values. We have Mars, the warrior, the one that gets things done. We have Jupiter, this great teacher, sage, abundance provider. We have Saturn, the disciplinarian. We have Chiron, the wounded healer. We have Uranus, the awakener. We have Neptune, the dream maker, and Pluto, Kali Yuga, the death and rebirth.
So you have all the planets, and then you have the sections of the chart. There are 12 sections of the chart, and each section of the chart is called a house or a domain, and each house represents a different area of life. And so depending on where the planets are in the chart and how they relate to each other kind of shows where a lot of the energy in this life is for someone, where a lot of the work is, what areas are highlighted, which areas are a little more deficient. Each sign is related to an element. Therefore, each planet is also related to an element. People who have a lot of water in their chart operate really differently than people who have a lot of air in their chart. But the main points are the planets, the houses, and then these 2 points, which are called the nodes of the moon, the north and the south node. Those aren't planets. They're not something you can point to, but they are they're mathematical coordinates according to the moon.
I was very drawn to what's called archetypal astrology. And that's really looking at the gods and goddesses as symbols of internal figures in our psyche. So for example, Jupiter is a planet that is about abundance, but it's also the king of the gods. And where does that sit within me? And how do I connect and utilize those big energies of Jupiter? So I was drawn to that version of astrology. And like you say, there are many versions of astrology. People are into predictive astrology. They're into couples astrology. They're into Sabian symbols.
It reflects your propensities, your assumptions, your attitudes about life, the values that motivate you, the things that interest you and compel you. It holds a mirror before your blind spots. That's how it interfaces with life. It's like looking into a mirror psychologically, a rather unflinching one.
Astrology has always had a public face. Most people meet it through broad statements and shared language. Horoscopes exist for that reason. They compress a complex system into something familiar and easy to repeat. They aren't meant to be precise. They're meant to travel.
The horoscope is a moment in time. Your chart is sort of what you came in with in this life, your strengths, the challenges you're probably going to face.
Horoscope, the word horo means hour and a sight of the hour. And if we went on to extrapolate an hour that you were born in a specific season, in a specific year, in a specific age.
Well, usually the horoscope in the paper or online is just your sun sign. So let's say you're a Gemini or I'm an Aquarius. It's only going to read out a little paragraph on what that sun sign may or may not go through that week or that month. That would be like me telling you about your life based on your ring size. It's not very complete. It's a little snapshot, but it really is more like a parlor game.
But a horoscope is, okay, here's where all the planets are right now in the sky. That's how that would affect this sign. So that's why they're more general as well, because it's trying to speak to so many people.
I think horoscopes are broad stroke. They are generalizations. They have to be able to publish something for the masses. There's a grain of truth often in them. They're touching on an archetypal thread there. When you're saying, these are the themes of your week or the values that might be coming out or the things you might be interested or curious about, as a Pisces or an Aries or an Aquarius or a Taurus, it's like, okay, I can kind of see that because they are touching on a bit of truth there. And it resonates with people for that reason.
Things can only happen at the right time. So, and that would include you can only be born at the right time. And that's what a horoscope is about. But we extend it to say that everything we say about relationships, everything we say about what's going on in this current moment is relative to the horoscope, the hour that you were born in the season, et cetera, et cetera.
But I think where horoscopes gets themselves in trouble a little bit is because they are so broad-stroked. They are appealing to the masses. And they're not taking into consideration the depth, the nuance of a unique birth chart.
I think it's safe to say there's no binding ultimate truth in them. There are things to know there.
The horoscope just becomes an interesting inroad, I think, to the language of astrology, into working with the symbols, to getting curious about ourselves. I don't want to completely dismiss horoscopes because they bring people in and they resonate on a certain level. But we also have to recognize that there's so much more to us. There's so much more to our charts. And when we really do this work from a perspective of depth in finding purpose and meaning in our life and using our chart as a wise guide in that process, it's almost as if the chart itself comes to life through its different placements, and we get to see different parts of ourselves through different angles and lenses, and the horoscope just kind of brushes over that. It gives, a nice inroad, but it's not the full picture.
And those horoscopes are usually done really horribly. people will read their sun sign, but for a horoscope like in a newspaper or a magazine or something, people should read their rising sign. And then that will make much more sense, just the way that it's done.
Professional astrologers will often poo-poo the horoscopes, because real astrology is much more complex than that. But if it weren't for those horoscopes, we wouldn't exist. We'd be reading the entrails of pigs or something, We would have gone that same way. It's kept us alive. The horoscope is based on the position of the sun in the zodiac. So you're a Gemini or you're a Virgo. And that's an important factor, and that's real, but it's just one. Where's your moon? The moon is the heart. And where's Venus? Where's Jupiter? And how do they interact with each other? So I want to be very careful not to dismiss horoscope astrology. It does divide humanity into 12 little boxes, which is a criticism. But we speak of introverts and extroverts. That's useful, and it divides humanity into just 2 boxes. So 12 boxes is practically granular compared to introverts and extroverts.
Some astrological ideas turned into shorthand. When used casually, Mercury in retrograde is one of them.
Mercury in retrograde is one of those ones that gets a lot of press, especially on social media. It's very buzzy, and I think it's very misunderstood.
There's sort of a cliche, which is true, it's just become a cliche, of retrogrades, which is a retrograde is a time to sort of reevaluate something, So retrogrades are always a time when things are slowed down. Mercury retrograde is classic for everything getting f***ed up, like your computer not working. Mercury is the planet of communication and technology. So computer, flights getting canceled, rides getting canceled, people not getting your text, misunderstandings in communication, all these things.
I don't think of it as causal. I think of it as synchronicity, as above, so below. So it's not Mercury made me do this or Saturn's in this aspect, and so it must be this. I always talk in divine possibilities. When Mercury is retrograde, it is a moment collectively for all of us to reflect and to contemplate and to review. That can be great. And if you're not willing to do that, it could be stalled cars, broken computers, or those things may happen anyway. But I think it's how we approach it that gives it the credence and the power in our own lives.
Someone outside of the astrological world, they might hint at superstition, but being inside astrology, when someone says Mercury's retrograde, I can't do that, that's pure superstition. Pure superstition. Because to me, it's like this has to be useful. And I think astrology applied to human beings, that's how we think of astrology, but astrology can be applied to anything.
But in terms of personal work, retrogrades really are a time to sort of slow down. And if you're working with an astrologer or you know your chart, think about, okay, this retrograde of this planet is happening in this area of my chart. Given that the energy of this planet is communication, and it's happening in the part of my chart that has to do with my relationship, what do I need to reevaluate within my communication when it comes to long-term partnerships?
Mercury seems to have a correlation with electronics and communication devices. It is the planet of language, so the communication stuff comes through. The folklore is don't buy anything electronic during a Mercury retrograde time. Beware of glitches with communication equipment. Some statistical work has been done, like lost luggage in the airlines. There's actually a measurable statistical increase of lost luggage during Mercury retrograde times. So all the astrologers, hooray, hooray, were right about it. It's tiny. The chances of you losing your baggage because, oh no, I booked a flight in Mercury retrograde are minuscule. It's like getting hit by lightning. So it's a real effect, but it's not something you want to build your life around, would be my experience. People tend to overreact to it.
Astrology doesn't stay abstract for everyone. Over time, people use it as a reference, not instruction, not command. They look at timing, periods of movement, periods of resistance, moments where effort flows, and moments where it doesn't. People tend to turn to it when decisions matter. Work, health, relationships, transitions without clear directions. Astrology doesn't decide, it situates. The choices remain ours.
Money, love, health, relationship, meaning. I'd say those are the basics. And I think astrology is a very good tool to understand more about those sectors of life.
You know, an example that Steve, my teacher, uses, and it gets right to the core of astrology. He says someone wakes up and they have an idea to move to Brazil. And it's not so much you look at your chart and say, what does the chart say? Should I move to Brazil? It's more about if you know who you are. If you're a person where family is the most important thing and being around the people you care about is the most important thing, then moving to Brazil, probably not going to work out so great for you. But if you're an explorer, you know, have a lot of Sagittarius or Jupiter in your chart, and you need to have these experiences that stretch you, and the idea comes up to move to Brazil, probably a pretty good idea.
Knowing when to hold them and when to fold them, you know, if you'll forgive the cliche, astrology is very clear about times in which, decisive action is indicated and supportive and is more likely to produce a positive result. And it's also very clear about when your wonderful idea, good news, it's currently half-baked, so bake it the rest of the way, before you publish it. And this gets into the technical areas, but they're pretty fundamental to daily astrological practice, when to move and when to wait.
Yeah, or at least if not a specific career path, qualities that that person's career will most likely have or would be most beneficial for that person to have. So if there's a big concentration of planets in Leo, for instance, very high probability that person will work with children or be a performer of some kind. If a person has a lot of planets in Libra or the seventh house, then there's a good chance they'll be a mediator or a lawyer or do something where they're trying to create harmony and bring things together and see both sides. Then the North Node is sort of what we're meant to be cultivating in this life. So that can be career or personal. And then there are points in the chart. The 10th house is all about career. The 6th house is all about your daily routine. So those two places in the chart also can give you a lot of information about maybe you have a planet in the 6th house that indicates you need to have more freedom. So probably not working a 9-to-5 job is the right choice. Or maybe the 6th house is you want a lot of structure. So probably working for someone else is the right choice. So there's stuff like that in the chart for sure.
To me, the question of health, right? There's physical health, there's mental health, and we could even argue there's spiritual health. I think one of the things you can see from a chart is a tendency to focus more on the physical health, the mental health, or the spiritual health, okay? And I think some people, they spend all their time and energy working on their physical health, but they're just grumpy all the time, right? And some people who are always worried about their mental health, and so it would hurt my feelings to go for a walk and to eat healthy. And so they might be mentally healthy, but physically not so much, right? And then spiritual health, I think a lot of us are struggling with that. What's the meaning? What's the purpose of life? And I think for each person, the amount of energy invested in physical health, mental health, and spiritual health, I think that's individual. And so I think the key of astrology is how much energy to invest in physical health, how much energy to invest in mental health, how much energy to invest in spiritual health.
Health is definitely part of the conversation. You can look at like your 6th house, for example, and look at the daily routines, the self-care that you might need based on the sign and the planets that are there. And you can lean in and you can cultivate those pieces. There's different branches of astrology. So some are going to really focus more on health. Some are going to really focus more on prediction. The astrology that I feel really drawn to is more of the psychological, more of the spiritual. Evolutionary is like, this is medicine for the soul. So I really look at the chart really holistically so that we feel more psychologically healthy, resilient, and then, we get the other pieces, in some ways kind of fall into place.
People don't usually turn to astrology because they're convinced. They come because something repeats. Astrology doesn't persuade through argument, it persists through return. Something holds long enough to be noticed. That's usually where curiosity begins.
The idea of it being my direction, that took time, but the organic experience of being lost and something about astrology helping me to find myself or get back on track, that was the profound personal experience that didn't give me all the answers, but it told me there's something here. So when I first started, and I'll call it practicing astrology, is I bought software so that I could put people's information in and look at the chart and then see what the chart says compared to what the books that I was reading said. And what that looked like was every person I met that seemed interested and knew their birth time, I would get their information and I'd put it in the computer, and then I'd look at the chart. And typically in that situation, the other person, the obvious question they have is, what does it say, right? What does it mean? But when I first started, the first several years, I knew how to recognize the symbols, but what it meant, I had no idea. There's what I read in the books, but for me, for astrology to make sense, what I read in the books had to be the same as what I was noticing with my own eyes. And that took years. It took years. And I think one of the issues, my critiques of astrology, is because most of the knowledge has been passed down in books, then when most astrologers, they just memorize what other people have said about certain placements, and then they repeat those. And yeah, the person receiving the astrology reading doesn't have to read all the books, but it's hard to make it real for people. And so you might hit a couple of themes and you might describe someone's personality sort of well, and that's cool, and we can call it entertainment, but it's not useful. And for me, the entertainment kind of piece of astrology didn't make sense for me because my first interaction, it was extremely useful. So the four main tools that an astrologer uses are planets, signs, houses, and aspects. And in my chart, I have an aspect between Mars and Venus. Mars, the god of war, Venus, the god of love and beauty. So as I was talking to Swami Sita, she noticed that aspect, and she started to point out a tendency I might have to run towards stressful situations, And when she said it, it was like, damn, like I do that. So something that was obvious to me once someone put the words to it, and she didn't know me from anything. She was just looking at the chart, but she knows that aspect, Mars and Venus, okay, right? It could get someone in trouble if they're running towards stress.
There's a couple of moments that come to mind. These images sort of just flash forward when you ask that. One, getting readings. It's like, how do they know that? Feeling so seen and validated, recognized, even if every single detail wasn't perfect. There's so much there that just bursts the heart open.
So it's more of the awareness that what astrology offers is psychologically true. So I took a class with Steve, and it was a class on the moon. Right? And he talked about everything related to the moon. And in my chart, moon is really strong, and it's in the house of fame, right? Fame and what you do for a career. And I'm sitting in class, and he's telling the story, and he gets to talking about the moon in the 10th house. And he says, 10th house moon, someone is meant to be a healer. And I'm sitting there looking at my chart, and I see my moon in the 10th house. I'm like, that explains a lot, And then he starts talking about a time in life when all of us are 27 and 3 months. It's called the lunar return. And it's the moon is activated by the moon. So if the moon is in the 10th house, the story is there's a good chance when this happens, you're not in the right profession and you're going to get this urge, right? This from nowhere, this whimsy that maybe I need to be doing something else. And the message was listen to that. And I'm sitting there and my jaw is on the ground because the most meaningful moment in my life he just described.
Astrology has always been met with skepticism. It doesn't fit clean categories. It isn't science. It isn't religion. It doesn't produce outcomes on demand. That ambiguity makes it easy to dismiss. Astrology asks for observation over proof, context over conclusion, patience over certainty. In a culture that rewards speed and instant answers, that can sound evasive.
There's skeptics and there's skeptics. You know, they're skeptics who are absolutely closed-minded and there's nothing you can say. You know, they're just fundamentalists and they've stopped thinking. And why waste our time talking to anybody like that? But I would honor an open-minded skeptic because I'd be the first to say, on the face of it, the idea that the planets have an effect upon our consciousness and our choices, it seems implausible. I don't blame anybody for being a skeptic.
Sometimes, I'm just like, fine, whatever, it's not for you. Great, find a different system. Or if I am wanting to sort of sway someone, which I try to do that less and less as I get older. Sometimes I say, well, we all agree that the moon has sway on the tides, correct? And someone will say yes. And then I'll say, well, our bodies are mostly water. So why wouldn't there be the same pull on us? And our brains are a lot of water. So if it's being pulled in a different direction, why wouldn't that change sort of like which parts of our brain are firing? Or, you know what I mean? If there's this obvious relationship between water and gravity and the moon, and we're mostly water, why would we be any different?
I think we're skeptics. I get it. I get where they're coming from, and at the same time, this work I think is connected to the greater collective unconscious. We think about the archetypes that connect all of us.
If you haven't had a great reading and you want to learn, have one. If you have no use for this, leave it alone. And as a huge, big celebrity once said to me in a casual meeting, I hate astrology. And I said, well, clearly you don't need it. I'm not a salesperson. So it's like, to me, everybody gets to choose what uplifts them in this life. And I wish everybody just did that instead of bagging on other people's things.
The description of reality that is implicit in the fact that astrology works is at sharp variance with what we currently view as common sense. And in the long history of common sense, of course, we have Earth at the center of the universe, man having dominion over women and the rest of the animals. I mean, common sense has a long history of being completely wrong. There is absolutely no reason for us to assume that suddenly here in the 21st century, common sense has it all right. This would fly in the face of the evidence of human experience since we were human. And so astrology, I think one of the reasons it creates such a virulent reaction in skeptics is that once we start to accept it, it knocks the stilts out from under some absolutely fundamental beliefs in the modern world.
It's always been mathematical. The biggest difference is that where the constellations were, this comes up all the time, so I might as well address it now. People text me all the time and they're like, wait a minute, am I not a Libra anymore? What's happened is there's been the precession of the equinox, which means that the signs, the constellations that were in these points in the sky when people first started studying this, those constellations have shifted. People think that maybe their signs have shifted, but it's really just a point in the sky that we're paying attention to. When those points in the sky move, then that's when we find all these other, that's how we build the chart.
So I think because when I first started, I had the sense, not that this is the answer, but with a whole lot of time and effort, this could be a wonderful tool. And so I went very slow. I don't feel comfortable saying something that I don't believe is true. And believe for me doesn't come from reading a book, it comes from my own lived experience.
Predictions are where astrology is most often misunderstood. Prediction implies certainty, a fixed outcome, a future already decided. Astrology doesn't really operate there. It observes conditions, not conclusions. When astrology is treated as prophecy, it loses usefulness. Its value exists before decisions are made, not after they're promised.
We can predict the questions that will come along for individuals or societies, but I don't think we're very good at predicting the answers. This is an area of intense controversy among astrologers. There are a lot of astrologers who make their bones by making predictions. If you make 10 predictions and people have paid for them all, and one of them comes true, they're going to talk about the one that comes true, so they don't look like they wasted their money.
And that's where people get themselves in trouble with predictions, with being very black and white about their charts. I've worked with people who come to me, because they are navigating relational challenges. And what I get to offer is, how can you understand them better? How can you understand their perspective better? This is what's coming up for you, and this is what we might see in the chart. And then they get to work on that together. But I will never say you should leave that person or that person. If there was, a potential dangerous situation, I would make referrals. I would encourage them to talk with someone. But I think as an astrologer's role, it's not our place to be saying you should be doing this or you should be doing that, or making any type of diagnoses or undermining, something that they might be working on with a real clinician, so to speak. I think we get to help support them and offer a new perspective, but it's really about helping people understand each other better.
There are some astrologers, again, who go more fatalistic. I never do that. I don't think it's helpful. It's like, here is a major challenge. You're going to have to keep working at this over and over and over. And if you don't keep working at this, here's the probability of what's going to happen. But that is up to you.
That's the heart of the matter. The albatross around the neck of astrology is fortune telling. And the fortune telling tends to run in the rather gloomy and negative direction. It's so easy to prove that incorrect. That my line is that the planets are questions. It's your fate to face certain questions at certain times. Anything that's truly a question, there's more than one answer. My job as a counseling astrologer is not to predict how you will react, but to warn you about a stupid-ass reaction that's quite available, and to encourage you to move to the higher ground. Like, here's what it looks like if you get this right.
I think on one hand, it gets to be broad stroke in general because we want to leave room for the range of possibility. On the other hand, you can get specific. And that gets to be a fun thing when you get to really, kind of play with our charts and look at, okay, I'm coming at a really abundant time and it's hitting my career zone. I got a short period of time to work on this. I'm going to say yes. I'm going to jump into life. I'm going to, so there's a way of kind of working with those specifics. And I think we also have to be very careful with predictions too. I've had a handful of clients come to me. An astrologer told me I was going to lose a friend. An astrologer said, I'm going to be getting sick. An astrologer said, and it's sure that might be part of a range of possibility, but it's not the full story.
I don't make predictions really clear you're going to break up, right? I say this is a time where the focus will be on your relationship, and it could be trickier and you're going to need to do more work there.
The planet Uranus, lord of earthquakes and lightning bolts. I love even saying it because however you say this planet's name, somebody thinks you've said it wrong. It's a classic example of synchronicity. Is it Uranus or Uranus or Uranus? And, all the other planets we agree. This is a planet about individuation. It's about getting comfortable with the idea that you may be right and everybody thinks you're wrong, and to not succumb to that herd instinct. And so it's about freedom, it's about individuality. Transiting Uranus, the moving one in the sky, enters somebody's house of marriage. The old fortune tellers, you'll get a divorce, earthquakes and lightning bolts in your house of marriage, obvious interpretation. That can happen. That's not a rare response to this. But what's really happening is you need more freedom within your marriage, and it's like, if this is happening for me, it's like, honey, we need to talk, the guy you married or committed to, he's not me anymore. Here's what I've become. I still love you and I want our relationship to work, but please update your files. Here's what I've become. I'm having a hard time figuring out who I am because who I am is so connected with my relationship with you. And so as much as I love you, I think I need to go visit my friend Joe in Oregon for a month, just to kind of get my head together. It's about me. It's not about you. It's for our marriage. And this would be a healthy Uranian response and the antidote to divorce, and that's what gets me out of bed in the morning, helping people that way. That's what this kind of astrology is all about.
Astrology can place its practitioners in places of influence. When someone seeks guidance, that moment carries weight. Astrologers don't create vulnerability, but they are responsible for how they respond to it. There is a line between observation and prescription. Astrology remains useful only while that line holds.
One of the things that I say regularly in session is you should trust yourself before you trust me.
I do believe that there is an ethical responsibility because astrology, people argue it's a religion, it's a language, it's a system. And whatever people argue, underneath it is the person's belief system. And sometimes people try to hide their beliefs behind the astrological system. So I think there is an ethical imperative to express this is my belief system. And even if you don't say it overtly, because sometimes if people believe in astrology and they hear an astrologer, they take what the astrologer said is all of astrology.
Astrologers are not therapists, and we have to be very clear about that. We get to be counselors, we get to guide people, we get to be curious about their experience, but there is an ethical line. We're not here to diagnose. We're not here to treat serious illness. We're not here to replace longer-term therapy. We're here to offer a perspective.
But I think my ethical obligation is to really know when I'm projecting, like when people have similar charts to me or are in situations that I've been in my life, to not give my own experience unless they ask for it, and to be honest, to give some guidance and give tools, but not ever say like, you have to do this or else. I get a lot of clients who have gone to astrologers and had horrible experiences because those astrologers are super fatalistic. Like, this will happen, this will happen, this will happen. And that's just not, that doesn't engender any sense of empowerment in anybody. So I definitely stay away from that. And I feel like that's a sort of ethical obligation, at least in my mind. And confidentiality, of course.
Astrology can overlap with psychology. It deals with inner life, patterns of experience, meaning over time. That overlap can feel therapeutic, but astrology isn't therapy. It doesn't diagnose, it doesn't treat, it doesn't replace care. What it offers is reflection. Its value depends on respecting that boundary.
I would say that evolutionary astrology, which is the kind I practice, is the fusion of astrology and ancient metaphysics and modern psychology. It's like a tripod with 3 legs, and we need them all. Couldn't possibly do this work without a knowledge of psychology. That's the language we speak.
Well, they are a natural fit that people don't ordinarily think of, but astrology is your cosmic DNA, your map to your soul. What did you come here to learn? Your strengths, your obstacles, your adversaries. It points all this out, but it doesn't tell you how to work with the map. Psychology has always been and is, in my experience, when it's used well, a confirmation of your strengths and assets and tools to undo trauma, pain, and bad habits and patterns. So I put it together, the map of the soul and the how to do that map to the very best of your ability.
There are 2 pieces of feedback I get about readings almost every time, whether I know the person or not, and generally I give readings to people I don't know. The first is that they feel a level of self-acceptance that they haven't experienced, because it's like, okay, there's nothing wrong with me. This is just what I'm working with this time. And the second thing I hear is we just got to something in 30 minutes that took me however many years in therapy to get to. Because in the chart, it's all right there. Talk therapy is important. It's important to come to your own conclusions and realizations for sure. But sometimes when you're having a hard time getting to the root of something, especially if you've sort of gone down all the pathways of, well, this happened and then this happened, but it's still not making sense for me. It's still not clicking. You're just getting to the root right away. People say, like, how do you know this? I'm like, well, I'm looking at your chart. This is a science. This isn't guesswork that I'm doing.
Astrology can sometimes enter with parenting, not to define a child, but to notice difference, temperament, rhythm, sensitivity to change. At its best, it isn't used to predict who a child will become. It's used to pay attention. The risk comes when description becomes limitation. Used carefully, astrology remains a good tool for listening.
Parenting is probably the most profound application of astrology that I've found. And it's rooted in my mom. The one thing that my mom says every time that we're pointing out how she failed as a mom, she just says, you guys were not born with instruction manuals. Every time. And it's true, we weren't. But then I think, actually, we were. The astrological chart. Because if what I'm saying is the purpose of the chart is to help me get to understand myself, and I'm looking at a child's chart, oh, wow. And I can understand who that child is on a deeper level and parent or nurture that, to me, it's going to go better.
People also ask me to read their baby's charts, and I generally say no to that as well. And that's because it's good for parents to know tendencies, but also you're here to be the steward for your child. I'm afraid of people parenting to the chart or away from the chart, and I don't think that's healthy. But I think if a parent has an understanding, like pre-puberty teen, of what is going on in a kid's chart or what their natural tendencies are, that can be really helpful in terms of, I need to give this kid more time to just be in the emotional phase before we can talk about the logical next steps. And then this kid, I need to sort of remind that it's okay to be in the emotional piece of it, because they will so quickly go to the logical steps.
As a parent, I definitely have looked at their charts, and at the same time, I hold their chart really lightly. One, because I want to give them so much room to be themselves, to come into their own, to really connect to just all the possibilities of who they can be.
Astrology is often misunderstood before it's examined. It's assumed to be predictive when it's really observational. Most misconceptions come from fragments taken as wholes. Astrology doesn't remove choice. It doesn't replace judgment. It offers orientation. Approached for what it isn't, it disappoints. Approached on its own terms, it clarifies.
I think oftentimes people just disregard it as woo-woo, as a funny party trick, as something that's just in the back of a magazine, that, oh, yeah, that's just broad stroke generalization. That doesn't apply to me.
Astrology is misrepresented sometimes as this silly and stereotypic use of signs. That frustrates me. I think what frustrates me the most is I'm in love with this tool that's extraordinarily helpful, that if people aren't really finding their way to that level, they don't even understand the astrology I understand.
I think a misconception is like astrology isn't accurate. Everything I've ever read about, Taurus doesn't resonate with me. And it's because there's so much more there than just that.
And I think what also happens too with social media is that astrology gets boiled down to memes. It gets boiled down to kind of funny GIFs. And what people aren't taking into consideration is the entire chart that is so nuanced, so textured, so depthful, so connected to these deep, deep ancient roots, that a lot of that gets missed when we're just talking surface.
Astrology is ever-changing. Its language shifts, its tools adapt, its access expands. What was once recorded by hand now moves through software and screens. That visibility brings distortion as well as reach. But the core remains unchanged. Attention to timing, observation of pattern, relationship between movement and experience. What evolves is the encounter, not the foundation.
I think astrology is an evolving thing.
I think it's becoming much more integrated in, it's always been part of the mainstream, especially when it comes to people's horoscopes and curiosity about that, as we chatted earlier. But I think it's becoming more seriously studied. It's becoming more integrated into people's counseling practices. I think what's happening more and more for folks is that we're recognizing that there's a science behind this, that there's people who've had real experiences with it.
The acceptance of astrology in society has gone through the roof. It was, when I was a kid, it was really fringe, to be interested in astrology. Now it's mainstream. Pop stars will say, I'm a Virgo or I'm a Taurus, or, things of that nature. It's become acceptable. The digital revolution has had an incalculable impact in that we're talking about sun sign astrology, like what's going to happen for Gemini in the newspaper. Nowadays, you can get sophisticated interpretations of your chart. I've written most of the text on your Android or your iPhone, Leela, Lila, Leela Astrology. It's an app that basically does what I do, and it's my voice. They say it's like having me in your pocket.
The app is really an outgrowth of what we've been talking about in this conversation. So I retired from the NFL for the second time in 2012. And for 3 years, I kept reading and studying astrology and taking classes. And I had another crisis where I was like, I'm not just going to hang out and play golf the rest of my life. Like, I want to do something with my life. And it wasn't until I started studying with Steve that I finally found something that I could and feel comfortable going around and spreading. Because it was a religious concept of there is a right way to live, but the right way to live for each individual at any given time is different. And when I found astrology and started learning more and living more according to what the chart suggested, I found that life started to make more sense.
50 years ago, couldn't conceive of doing something like that. Now anybody, can get a sense of what their chart is about and decide for themselves if sophisticated astrology works for them. Digital revolution. It's wonderfully multidimensional and diverse and adjusts itself to many different levels of possibility.
I think that, the way that it's offered is obviously already changing, like we spoke about with AI and all these apps. I think it is becoming more culturally acceptable. My dream is that, whether it's astrology or Enneagram or human design or whatever other system speaks to you, that people take it seriously as a tool for self-growth, and that people take self-growth seriously. And hopefully we can start to have different conversations and more compassion, more empathy. I mean, I think that's my greatest dream and goal with individuals as well. Like, can you have more empathy for yourself and others?
Astrology has been dismissed, revised, and reinterpreted, and still people return to it, not for certainty, for perspective. Astrology doesn't explain life. It doesn't remove responsibility. It orients. People come back when timing matters, when cycles repeat, when attention becomes necessary. The return isn't accidental. It's the same impulse that started the practice. Looking up.
Something I truly believe is that we are here to become the fullest versions of ourselves. And I believe that astrology gets to be an ally in that process.
I would say that astrology is a tool of empowerment. It's this picture, you see a picture of a chart and it will guide you.
The original astrologers were scribes. They were hired by the king, and the king wanted to know, are my actions sanctioned by the gods? And the original scribes, they would go outside and they would take copious notes about where the planets are. Venus rose at this time, and then they would have other notes of what's going on in the kingdom. So they had this record of 900 years of what was going on up there, what was going on down here, and they started to make correlations. And that's what astrology grew out of. Fast forward in time, all you have to do now is get your smartphone, right, and look to see where the planets are right now, and you have your own observation to say, what's going on in my life right now? And even apps now, you can go back in time. This is when I had a breakup, got divorced, got a new job, meaningful thing happened to me. What was going on in the chart?
Our souls came into this life to do specific work, and astrology helps you understand what that curriculum is, which are your challenges, your strengths, your hang-ups, your attachments. And astrology can really help you align your ego with your soul's purpose. And when the ego and the soul purpose are integrated and aligned, then people feel very powerful. People feel really good. Even if they're going through a hard time, there's an internal resonance that feels steady and solid. And when our soul desire, which is way more important than our ego desire, when our soul desire is the one that's leading the way, and the ego is then there to help facilitate that. And I think that astrology is a really, really, really succinct and good way to see how can I facilitate this journey for my soul.
This is not play by numbers. It is not a rubric of how to be in your life. It's a pointer in the direction of your evolution. Everybody can take as much or as little of that as they want to make their lives as fully expressed and fulfilling as they can be.
The thing that's most important to me is to encourage people. Is we have access to enough information now, is that if you put a little bit of effort in, you're going to be much more useful to yourself than an astrologer. And just a reminder, for astrology to grow, we have to close the books a little bit and trust our own observation, right? Because that is the origin of where astrology came from.
When I was about 13, I met a person I perceived as a woman. I think she was about 16 or 17. And she was a German woman, and she taught me palmistry. And on the plane of your hands, the palm of your hand, there's a plane of Venus and a plane of Jupiter and a plane of Saturn. Palmistry is organized intellectually the same way that astrology is. They come from similar traditions. And so by the time I was 17, I was kind of the egghead in school who did palmistry. I mean, go figure. It was the only way I thought I'd ever have a chance to hold hands with girls, I guess. But so astrology and palmistry and astronomy all were this stew in my mind. And by the time I got to the end of my teens, they had all sort of come together, and I was completely obsessed with it.